other day did a big Substack about him, and
So
again
Billy Billions.
in
So
his trial,
yeah.
he was again trying to say he was basically saying I lied in all my lyrics and I pretended I was involved in this shooting and stabbing. I did it just because that's what drill is. You have to be the big man, and that's that's what he claimed. It didn't work, but it seems to be an increasing sort of thing I hear in people saying in court is I'm just singing that song because that's what a drill rapper has to do. I didn't actually do any of those crimes.
So I've got your tweets up here about the Billy Billions trial. So let me read that out for the people just so that they can familiarize themselves. So London rapper Billy Billions, real name Bailey McKenzie, was today jailed for 33 years plus 6 years on license for conspiracy to murder. He's already serving 13 years for a separate firearms charge, and you did write a Substack about him back in July. And essentially, the conspiracy to murder charge related to a shooting in December 2020, where a university student with no links to any gangs was shot twice in the head and suffered catastrophic injuries, including permanent blindness, after the Holly Street gang carried out a ride out into the London Fields territory in Hackney. Now, you tweeted, I understand Judge Philip Katz KC told Mackenzie Billions that he provided the gun used in the shooting, but told him you didn't want to get your hands dirty. The 3 Holly Street members who went on the ride out have previously been given long jail sentences, and you've got a full-blown Substack about the whole Billy Billions case up on your Substack now, which people should go and check out. But how do you feel about? I mean, this is just another case. It was a shooting all the way back in December of 2020. A lot of people, they really like Billy Billions' music. He's been quite a popular artist over the years. What can you tell me about how this case went down from what you witnessed reporting on it?
Yeah, so this is again this is one I've been following for quite a while. His original trial was last year, and it collapsed for a sort of boring legal reasons I don't need to go into. But um, the retrial happened this year, and it was kind of pretty much a rerun. The prosecution said the same evidence, and he pretty much said the same kind of defense. But this time, the jury, different jury, they found him guilty. And what was really interesting was what happened on Instagram. So a few days before he was going to be sentenced, he or people associated with him, because it was too slick to be done on a mobile in at home. And sorry, in prison. He probably has got a mobile in prison, but he posted on Instagram a very sort of slick 5-page document, which was basically saying that he was innocent. He'd been victim of miscarriage of justice, and also sort of playing the race card, saying, I this wouldn't have happened if I was white. He apparently, shouted out to the jury when he was convicted, something along, you wouldn't have convicted me if I was a white guy. Um, and if you look at the evidence, he's talking rubbish, but it plays to an audience. A lot, probably most of, many, if not most of his fans are black, and they probably feel that black guys do get you know mistreated by the police and the criminal justice system. But the judge was not impressed at all by especially the fact that he'd been named, the judge had been named and was accused of being biased. So this really did not go down too well. He insisted that when he was sentencing him, he was not taking it into account. He was not, vindictively adding on a few years, but it kind of felt like that.
So I've got the whole statement here. I hadn't actually seen this before. It's very long, but I would like to read it. We could maybe stop here and there and give some opinions on it. But yeah, he did post this to his Instagram, and it's a, like you say, it's very slick. They've made it look like an official document from the court, which, to be honest, I don't think that's a really great look. I mean, it almost looks. I don't know whether the word forgery is fair to put on this, but he's made this look like an official piece of paperwork. So let me read out some of this. He's put the title Central Criminal Court Official Statement. Now make that make sense. There is no justice, just us. This is my full and final statement. To open, I would like to clarify a couple of misunderstandings. One, my ethnicity is black. Both of my parents are black, and my grandparents and grandparents are from Jamaica and are all black. And number two, my exact words to the jury after the verdict was announced was, "You would have never sent me down if I was white. I did not call anyone racist, but I believe race was a factor in my verdict." And he goes on to make this very long breakdown. It says, "Detective Constable Clinton Lennon, the lead detective in charge of my case, altered evidence which was confirmed in court and under oath blamed another officer for this. Specialist crime analyst Nicola Foskett, which she denied. She stated under oath that she had proof that the alterations were made by DC Lennon. DC Lennon had to later admit under oath that on at least 3 occasions he had charged key text and snap messages, which gave a completely different meaning to what was said, not only supporting the prosecution's case, but more importantly, undermining my defense. Yet there was no uproar about this." So he's essentially saying that they altered evidence and that there was a misunderstanding. Now, I'll go on to read the rest of this, but just your thoughts. Do you feel like there's anything to this? Is this just a load of nonsense? You know, I did see a lot of people on Reddit saying, "Oh, he was done dirty," and they did mess up the evidence, but clearly that led to a conviction. So, what do you think of that statement?
No, I mean, I think what he's quite cleverly, what he's doing is blowing up a small discrepancy that this police officer was forced to admit that he'd sort of amended, he changed the wording of the message, and that was said in open court. It was said in front of the jury, and this same jury has found him guilty. So if they thought it was such a big deal and such a glaring flaw in the case, they would have found him not guilty, or they would have not been able to reach a verdict. But it was obviously to them like, okay, that's a bit weird. That's a bit of a cock up, but it's not big enough to undermine the whole case against him. I'm sure if he thinks it's that big a point, he will take it to the Court of Appeal. But I just don't think it's going to lead. I don't think it's going to get him off, because he's making it. I mean, for him, it's perfect. It makes him, oh, I can just say this, and people who haven't followed the case are going to think, oh, he's been fitted up. It's outrageous, but it's not a bit. It's not, in the big picture, a massive flaw. I mean, if it had been, the judge would have thrown it out. Would have said, right, this case can't go on. These charges have to be dropped. These things go on in open court, and you can't just fit somebody up so blatantly. It was a mistake. Sometimes police and prosecutors make mistakes, but it's not as big a deal as he's making it out.
No, for sure. So he goes on to make a number of other points. He says, "I was convicted last year for giving a gun to someone with the intent to or enable somebody to endanger life, which I firmly denied. Not only were the jury unaware of the alterations to evidence DC Lennon made in the previous trial, the jury were also told about a bullet shell casing that was found at his house at the back of the sofa. This is lies. This non-existent shell case led to my previous conviction in the first trial, as I was convicted by a majority verdict for the firearm, and it was a hung verdict on the count of conspiracy to murder. The lies were revealed in court in my retrial this year, and the jury chose to ignore all of it. I put that down to me being a black man. Irrespective of the injustice they were hearing, it didn't matter. Surprisingly, 2 members of the jury were crying when the second majority verdict was announced, yet they came to an 11-1 decision against me. Now make that make sense." So he's really calling out the jury. I mean, what do you think of that? I think that's a bad look, to be honest. But I mean, I guess he's thinking that this might go somewhere for him.
Yeah, I mean, if I was in his position, I would do the same. I would I would word it in such a way that it makes him look as if he's a victim of miscarriage of justice. As I wrote in my Substack, the real victim of this is that guy Khalid Mohammed, who was a totally innocent young guy, black guy, sitting in that car. He was about to go out to a party to celebrate his friend's birthday, and randomly this gang from the Holly Street turned up. They shouted to them, "Are you Fields? In other words, are you from London Fields? Are you London Fields gang members?" They said, they asked them, like, "Where do you live?" And one of them said, "Oh, near Tesco in Mare Street." And then the next minute they say, "Oh, fuck it," and then start shooting. They riddle the car with bullets, and this guy Khalid is now blinded. He's got permanent brain damage. He's the real victim. And those guys in that ride-out car, they were basically sent to that mission by Billy Billions, and the evidence is clear about that. He doesn't have to be physically on the ride out himself. He manipulated it. He even sort of told people off in the Snapchat group. He said, you're not doing enough. With one guy who didn't go along on the ride out, he gets sort of ballsed out by Billy Billions. So yeah, I don't buy whatever he's saying. But I don't blame him for saying it and trying to put that campaign on Instagram.
Yeah, he went on and on for a whole bunch of points he made. He said that the verdict were the product of a biased and unfair trial. The police and the justice system is corrupt and dishonest. He said, I'm no angel, but I'm not a killer. I didn't conspire to kill anyone or force anyone to do anything. I didn't provide the firearm. He says the charge has been a catalyst to many things that followed. All that was needed in the trial against me was bad character evidence and my art as a drill rapper, which pays my bills. To bolster a non-existent case, the trial with body-worn video footage exposed the shell casing was in fact a hair ornament for people with dreadlocks, and my co-defendant is a Rastafarian, and that's part of his religion. The shell casing narrative was created to have me convicted, and it worked. When cornered by my defense, after confirming the search of my co-defendant's house was due to him of being suspected of being in possession of a gun, the police constable Maria Finberg confirmed the reason the shell casing she had allegedly found at the back of the sofa was not in the evidence bag is because she forgot, and she admitted to only reporting she found a bullet casing and forgot to put it in an evidence bag 2 days after the search. Another officer involved in the search was questioned and said he couldn't remember the search, and basically, he says the person I allegedly gave to the firearm to was unanimously acquitted of conspiracy to murder and possession of a gun a year ago. This has been the crux of the conspiracy to murder charge against me. How does that make sense? Is there anything to what he's saying here, or do you just feel like it's just a load of rubbish?
No, I mean, I wasn't there. I wasn't there every day of the trial. I don't know it as he does. He obviously, it's his case. He knows every single bit of the evidence. And he's saying that he's been stitched up, and if that's the case, he will get leave to appeal at the Court of Appeal, and maybe one day he'll get his name cleared. Personally, I'm not holding my breath. I don't think there's enough in what he's saying. But just on Instagram, he, about an hour after he was found guilty, he posted another, or his associates posted another, Instagram message. So he obviously, whatever the judge said was water off a duck's back, didn't make any difference.
Yeah, for sure. So there's some interesting comments under this essay on Reddit, and I think this is a really interesting sentiment that's worth spreading. It says, ladies and gentlemen, please stay away from gang life. Instead of writing this essay before your sentencing, you could have written it during your final year at university and just got a normal job. A lot of people, I think what's interesting about the UK drill community is that, you've got all these people following it on Reddit, but a lot of them, they don't really agree with what these rappers are doing. This is a comment that says, I feel for him, but one way or another, this guy was going to jail. In the end, the consequences of your actions in life will always catch up to you. It was all fun and games to rap about shooting and stabbing your ops, but now look at how it worked out.
Yeah. I mean, the guy all four guys who were in that car who was shot at, they were doing what that guy on just said. They were living good, profitable, harmless lives. They were all going to university. One of them, the guy who got shot, Khalid, he was in the middle of doing a degree about accounting, an accounting degree. He has since tried, according to a victim impact statement, he's since tried to go back to that, despite being blinded and having, brain damage and serious headaches all the time. But he's been unable to do it, and he's had to give up that career. So, now he's just being cared for by his father, who's had to give up his job. So it's all those victims who they're not going to get, nobody cares about them when it comes to, these drill rappers, fans. No, they don't care about the victims.
Yeah, no, it's really
Gets
sad.
me quite cross sometimes.
Yeah, I think there's this very sad kind of gangster worship that goes on, and people just looking for any excuse to let these guys off. There's another interesting comment here. It says drilling and the gang life is all lovely until you're in front of the crown. Playing the race card now is egregious. And they share a quote from one of their favorite actors, Denzel Washington. It says the system isn't designed to play fair towards us, so why give it a reason to do the unfair? A very deep
Mm.
and powerful message if you understand it, and I agree, and I think it is really important to highlight the actual impact of the victims. I cover a lot of gang violence on my channels, and I often really try and dig into the families' reactions, and some of the statements made by the parents who lost their children to this stuff. It really just goes to show you that there's really nothing cool about it. That harrowing story that you just described of the student who lost his sight, and he couldn't go back to his studies and stuff. It's just really sad, and that just goes to show you the cost of this stuff, and the fact that really you know some of these guys, they do need to be off our streets. And a lot of drill fans might not be happy to hear that, but it's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, obviously before drill came along, there was rap music and hip hop, and that was great, and it was really successful, and people rapped about all sorts of subjects. Why now do we have to, drill is sort of it's only that has created the sort of, oh, we have to be about violence, you have to be authentic, and you have to have actually lived a gangster life, actually either been shot at or been stabbed or you know uh, been done some time in jail. But can't we just go back to old fashioned rap?
Yeah, I mean, it's a shame, really. It's a shame that there's just so much negativity that comes out of this stuff. I think there has been some really, good role models that have kind of come out of that lifestyle and changed their lives around. But unfortunately, we just keep seeing time and time again guys just kind of throwing away their lives and their freedom, and just really not caring about the victims and the people they hurt. And so I think it's really important to highlight, the actual human cost of what's going on behind this music.